So, hello world out there. I hope everybody's doing all right All right. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are in the world across the seven continents. And today, here we have as a guest, Brody. And how you doing, Brody? How's it going?
I'm doing great, man. Thank you so much for having me on.
No problem, man. And I appreciate you joining us on our season 2, episode 9 episode here on the Psych Life Podcast. And hello out there, audience. That should have been the first people I say hi to out there. What's up? And Brody, I appreciate you coming on this platform. And I found your Instagram page, I believe, through a friend of mine, through a mutual friend of ours. And I saw that you were posting a lot of cool stuff. There was something about you that interests me. There were many things, but before we even get into that, do you mind telling the audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. And a little bit about me is I am 31 and I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and I'm a brain surgery survivor, and I have a passion for neuroscience. I went through a lot of difficult times when I was growing up, and mainly because I had some issues with addiction and mental health. But that came on, in my opinion, from what some causations and manifestations of what was going on in my brain. And I believe that derived from something that was going on in my left frontal lobe. And I had a cavernomus malformation that was my left frontal lobe, about the size of a cranberry. And that caused me to have grand mal seizures. And even after the doctors removed that cavernomus malformation, I continued to have those seizures for about a year after that. But what caused me to finally heal was me to get a hold of my mental health and cognitive health, which was done from two things that I attribute it to, and that is meditation and nutrition. And those two things are so pertinent because of the fact that, and most people overlook the two of those things because that, and you'll have to forgive me because I get emotional speaking about that, because about these things when I recount this story, because it's difficult to speak about. But people overlook the significance of what meditation and nutrition do for the brain. And it allowed me to recover, and specifically through the meditations of Joe Dispenza and Dr. Joe Dispenza. And if you would have talked to me about a year ago, I wasn't able to put sentences together, honestly and truthfully, bro. And now, piece by piece, day after day, I'm able to speak fluently, thoroughly, and day after day, I'm getting better. And it's really been an incredible journey.
Brody, I really appreciate you, man, being on this platform. I appreciate you opening up, and I hear you 100%. And thank you so much for sharing some of the stuff that you just shared and opening up for the audience. You said that you were a brain surgery survivor, and you also said that you were struggling with addiction before your surgery, and you attributed the addiction to what was happening in your left frontal lobe. right? And
Yes.
do do you mind sharing a little bit about um, that time in your life? I know this is tough, and it's okay if you don't want to share. I really mean that. You just say it, and we'll continue on with the conversation. I can edit this part out, by the way. But do you mind sharing about that phase in your life where you were struggling with addiction? I'm sure people labeled you into boxes, the ones who didn't know what was going on, and you were struggling with something that was in the physical realm. It just couldn't be seen because it was in your left frontal lobe. Do you mind sharing your experience during that time you were struggling with addiction and what drugs you were using?
So during that time, a lot of people, and young men especially, they have a difficult time controlling their impulses. I don't know if I'm sure that you can relate, but when you're a young man and you're not making the correct decisions, and that was especially strong for me during that time when I was 21, 22. I made some really poor decisions during that time. And I truly do attribute that to what was going on in my brain. And there's two areas, the ventrolateral prefrontal cortex and the ventral medial prefrontal cortex, that are directly correlated to those areas that they've done research on, that to your decision making and impulse control areas of your brain. And obviously the brain stem as well, because that's very primal, but that is very it is extremely relevant to those areas of where that cavernomus malformation was.
During that phase of your life, where you were struggling with addiction, and I appreciate you, by the way, educating the audience about the prefrontal cortex, especially the medial, the other part. But do you mind sharing how that experience was for you through addiction, and what type of addiction are we talking about with what drugs, if you don't mind?
Sure, yes. And so I was taking opioids. I was taking excessive amounts of alcohol, and that led me in some very tough situations with I got in a lot of fights, and a super bad situation with a bouncer, and knocked me out cold in the street, where I was just completely laid out there, where the ambulance had to come get me. And like there was lots of situations where I was dealing drugs, and like lots of situations that I never would have imagined in a million years that I would get into now, you know?
No, absolutely, man, and I appreciate you being a little bit more open. After your surgery, what were some of the things that you said you couldn't? If I were to have invited you on this podcast about a year ago, you wouldn't have been able to formulate sentences. You went on to say earlier on that you made some lifestyle changes that were very crucial in your recovery, such as meditation and the nutrition that you were eating. What after your surgery, what were the aspect, what were some of the circumstances and things you had to go through to overcome what you were going through, and what motivated you or inspired you to start meditating and change your nutrition the way you did?
Yeah, so once there was a specific incident in my life, I was driving down actually to Miami, and I was in the car and I was just listening to these meditation tapes, and I believe it was a hypnosis session, and something just clicked. It just went past that analytical filter and into the subconscious. And from that point, I was just hooked on meditation and couldn't get enough of personal growth. And from that point, I just truthfully became a new person, and every day wanted to meditate, wanted to listen to hypnosis tapes, wanted to just, and like I said, I attribute that to Joe Dispenza, especially, and his tapes. But there was just something, there's almost like a light switch that turned on, if I can, of something that was inside me.
Do you mind, because you mentioned that something clicked, right? And that's kind of like what happened to me for a while. And meditation, I stumbled upon it a little bit earlier in my development than you did, but the feelings involved, the way I felt once I meditated was beyond understood. And the more and more I meditated, you mentioned the name Joe Dispenza, right? And I'm aware of this individual, and excuse me if I butcher his last name, but English is not necessarily my first language. But I remember my experiences when meditating, and I used to try and meditate on something. That's how it started, right? I was ill-informed. I used to try and manifest what I wanted through meditation. And obviously, after reading a few Dalai Lama books, now this is fast forwarding 3 years later, I think I was like 25 at this point, or 24. Someone gave me a Dalai Lama book. And the funny story about that is that the person who gave it to me is no longer around, because he ended up committing suicide earlier this year. I mean, it's been one of those years.
Oh yeah.
2020 has been one of those years. It hit me hard when I found out this person committed suicide, but he changed my life without him knowing when he gave me those Dalai Lama books, because he gave me one, and then I ended up buying 3 of them, and I put it in the office because we all work together. And I said, "Oh, look, I bought these for us so we can read it. When we're at work and I'm not here, you can read yours." And the point of it is that meditation is a way for you to actually deconstruct and clear your mind. And one of the things that intrigued me about your page, Brody, was that I saw how into the brain you were, and brain science and neuroscience, and I to create, to be able to have this ultimate focus, this ultimate relaxation, this ultimate peace of mind. You have to really remain at a neutral level in a society where everyone polarizes subjects, and the mind is something where you have to keep it at that neutral level to be able to put your focus into something and create and manifest something. And meditation is just for that, to be able to clear your mind and be able to remain focused on literally nothing, on just your breath, to be able to then create that, put that focus towards what you want. And so the meditation that you focused on, though, with Mr. Dispenza, do you mind sharing what exactly that meditation is? Because the meditation with the Dalai Lama, he literally terms meditation as observing without judging. And
Sure.
And so the way I would practice was I would sit down, clear my mind, look at a chair, and I didn't want to call it a chair. I didn't want to see it as a chair. I saw it as everything, as a table, a chair, a place where I can put my stuff. You see what I mean? I deconstructed my reality. So just shoot me, what exactly is the meditation with Joe Dispenza there?
Sure, absolutely. So his tapes, or the meditations, are focused. They have like kind of a wide variety, but there was one in particular that kind of stuck to me, and it's called The Blessing of the Energy Centers. And it's about all of your organs, like your brain, heart, gut, or your sex organ, and it's about balancing them. And so it focuses like on like really having your coherence within them. So it's like kind of like body in space. It's like it's not easy to describe, but it's body divergent focus. So
when you say that, do you mean focusing on the senses?
Right, yes.
Yeah. That's an awesome strategy for meditation, which I've honestly, the Dalai Lama was the first one for me. So he talks about that type of meditation, and Joe obviously know what he's doing. What type of effect you were credited after you said a year ago you wouldn't have been able to do this podcast and formulate sentences. What you credit this to meditation and your nutrition? I know you said that, but what is it about meditation that you think it did to your central nervous system, your cerebellum, and your whole brain as a whole, and your body, that you're able now to formulate these sentences on this podcast?
That's another great question. I think that for one, it really gives me, there's so much neurogenesis that happened. There's a little more of a left and right brain connection. So my corpus callosum is all the brain is talking to each other better, because when I was trying to speak before, it wasn't coming out. My sentences that I was trying to formulate was not appearing when I wanted it to. So that was very difficult for me. So there's just more balance and wholeness in general. So I don't necessarily know from a neuroscientific perspective what is going on 100%, but I definitely can say the corpus callosum is communicating way better than it used to.
I love how you use the word neurogenesis. And within the last 10 years, I mean, that word was a theory. And now with the scientific advancements in today's age, we can actually see the brain in a way that nobody ever saw it before for thousands of years. And it's not no more of this speculation from Freud. Although, we'll throw credit where credit's deserved with the unconscious mind. But everything else after that word is out the window. Now we got neuroscience, we got brain science. And the fact that you use the word neurogenesis, it just goes to show that you acknowledge that with the brain surgery you had, there was obviously, your brain was impacted, not only from what was happening in your left frontal lobe, but also from the surgery itself. And it almost had to create, through neuroplasticity and neurogenesis, it had to create this connection so you can develop and formulate sentences again. And that is honestly, Brody, a miracle within itself, because when you look at life, this is the only planet in the universe that we are aware of that has life. And what is life? Life is breath. Whether you look at trees, whether you look at animals, whether you look at ourselves. And now for the first time, we can actually pinpoint areas in the brain and go in and take out tumors or whatever's going on that's causing disturbances, and actually make an individual self in the long run better overall. And that is amazing within itself. And Brody, in this platform, we've interviewed shamans, we've interviewed empaths. So really, it's an honor to have you on. I really appreciate you. We've interviewed public figures, authors. I mean, we'll go on and on. But this is the first time we ever interview a brain surgery survivor. And I have to be honest with you, man, you're really brave for doing what you did, because if right now they diagnosed me, even me knowing all the research and everything, they diagnosed me with something similar as to what you had, I would, I don't know what would happen. I probably want to run away from the earth, but that's not possible, right? I would probably be like Patrick Star and hide under a rock. But you faced it, and you did what was best for you, man. And I really appreciate that. If I saw on your Instagram that you did a post, right, that said the westernized doctor only spends about 9 minutes per patient in the United States. And so what made you make that post? Because it's a very powerful post. I mean, you someone that critically thinks can easily see what the message you're trying to give there. But just for the sake of it, what was the message that you were trying to give from that post?
My message, quite simply, is that we need change in our society, and it's more relevant now than ever. We need more doctors and healers, because we can see the impact of how expensive healthcare is in society, and it's just so incredibly important that if something doesn't change within the aspects of healthcare, that we're due for more failure.
Hey man, I don't, just by being yourself, I'm kind of baiting myself just by your presence and asking questions. And I'm gonna be honest here, I try so hard to stick away from political stuff, right? But for the sake of it, I guess this time I'll open more up. And that message that you just gave and that post reminded me of corporate America. And I'm all for, I'm a libertarian, or I believe in freedoms and everything, but they almost corporized the health industry, right? You go inside, you see your doctor for 9 to 10 minutes. He asks you some simple basic questions. He gathers your symptoms. He gives you a prescription medication, and that's it. They literally corporized, if that's even a word, the healthcare system. And I've witnessed it before when I have clients go see a psychiatrist. The psychiatrist, I refer them to a psychiatrist because I feel it's needed. But then the psychiatrist, they see the client for about 20 to 30 minutes, and they leave with a prescription to something that I didn't diagnose them with, but obviously they did. And there's a huge discrepancy within the system when this happens. We have to acknowledge this. And then I'm put in a position as a mental health counselor where, okay, the psychiatrist prescribed them this. I don't agree with it, but I don't have authority on what medication that client should get or not. And I don't want that authority, because I understand my competency level on some things. That's not where my training is. But the psychiatrist prescribed him this medication, and now we're in a dilemma, right? Because of what the psychiatrist diagnosed them with is not what I'm seeing, and the medication he gave them may suppress some of the symptoms they're experiencing, but not all of them. And so there's a big dilemma within the medical industry, Brody, and that's why. And I'm sorry I broke that down your post, man. I got all that from your post when I saw it, and I appreciate. And those are the type of information that Instagram should be used for. And I'm glad there's pages like you who like yours who actually use it the way it's supposed to be used, man.
Yeah, it sounds like a double-edged sword that you're dealing with there. And I dealt with that personally when I was going through the healthcare system before I healed. And I would go into a doctor's office. I would see a doctor around 9 minutes, and I never would heal. I was dealing with things such as arthritis in both of my forearms, and they would send me to a doctor who would send me to another doctor, and I was just going through a vicious cycle of where I never truly found out where my pain was being generated from. And so it was just that difficult thing that that's because all pain is generated through the nervous system that we come to find out.
Yeah, I'm sorry. You used the word arthritis. Did you ever find out what was happening with that pain, or they just kept bouncing you from doctor to doctor?
Well, I ended up healing it through my meditation and nutrition, but that pain is such a general term, and it was just I had this sharp forearm pain, bilateral forearm pain, and this was after my brain surgery. But the doctors were sending me from doctor to doctor because they didn't know what it was. It was just that arthritis going on in both forearms. So it's just like they couldn't understand what was going on.
The way the system is set up, right? Once again, you use the word double-edged sword. I appreciate that, because the reason the doctor refers is because liability is lifted. And I'm telling you this as a mental health counselor, because there's certain bureaucracy involved and protections a clinician, a doctor, whoever is in the healthcare field as a professional has to take. So the reason people refer is because they may know that person the person they're referring to may not know, but at least they're freeing themselves of liability, right? So I it's that I have to be careful, Brody, because I actually work in the field. You know what I mean? But I'll give you an example. Let's say I have a client, right, who graduated from probation, and I've been seeing this client mandated by the court. The client no longer is court ordered to see me. You getting it so far, right? He's no longer court ordered to see me, or the female is no longer court ordered to see me because they graduated probation. But I still feel like they're a liability. But their probation time finished. I will recommend them in the report that they should go to, let's say, NA meetings, or they should continue aftercare services with a government provider. Whether they choose to or not, that's up to them. But what happens is that I'm freeing myself of liability, right? I believe that they need it, but I cannot force them, and so I'm freeing myself of liability. If I don't know what the diagnosis is and I can't help them, I'm going to refer them out, and that way I'm freeing myself of liability. It's almost, that's why I said that the whole system is, I'm so sorry about just one last thing. The whole system is set up to like a corporate type of style business, and it's not supposed to be set up like that, if that makes any sense. But I'm sorry, you were going to say something?
Well, I say that's so sad because it's placing the well-being of the client ahead of a certain law that is protecting some structured law that is, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. No, I understand. They're trying to find causation where human being behavior there is none. And I understand. They're treating it like if it's an engineering formula. rather than understanding the possibilities of the real world when we're talking about human behaviors and the correlation behind certain aspects. And I'm sorry I'm going so deep into this. Actually, I never really do, but your story actually inspires me, Brody, and I really appreciate you, man. And you talk about meditation, and I mentioned earlier we've had a bunch of healers. I've had There's a good friend of me, friend of mine. If the audience out there on this platform knows, his name's Dr. Bridge. He's always been a guest on this platform. He's always talking on a clinical aspect. We've had shamans, we've had empaths. I have to go back to that interview to find out exactly what the empath healing style is. But the purpose is that healing doesn't have just one type of form. The westernized version of healing revolves around the suppression of symptoms. The other Eastern type of healing, depending on which one we're talking about, involves of actually harnessing your mind by not identifying with your thoughts, and which incorporates meditation. And then we've interviewed shamans who use specific rituals, but the goal is always the same thing, which is to heal. The only thing
Right.
is with westernized medicine, westernized approach of healing, the medication aspect is necessary, but I think it's being misused in today's world. Now,
How much
you go ahead,
placebo?
go ahead.
How much of that is placebo though? Because I know in some cases medication is important, and I'm not going to discard that, because I know there are psychiatric cases where absolutely, but the mind is the most powerful vessel, and they're still not, the limitations of the mind is so, it's, I could go on for as long as the day is long about it. And, so.
How much of that is placebo? And I appreciate that question. A huge chunk of it, if we look at the science behind placebos, man. I mean, even in my undergraduate courses, imagine this wasn't even graduate school. We did an experiment in our class where we had to bring in a subject. Obviously, I brought in my friend, and everybody was given a pill. Half the class had a placebo, half the class had an actual caffeine pill. What happened is everyone took a test before they took the pill, and everybody took a test about an hour after the class started. Once that first test was done, they took the pill. Then we waited about 45 minutes for the drug to kick in. They took the test, and what we showed was that there was no significant difference between the people who took the caffeine pill and the people who didn't. They all thought they were taking a caffeine pill. Therefore, all their tests were somewhat similar. So the placebo effect is important. But let me use an example of mine, Brody. When I was 16, I had some anger issues. What kid during puberty, their brain isn't adjusting in a different way. Obviously, I punched a steel door. This is the hand, actually, and I had 5 screws in it. I got 5 screws in it, and they gave me 2 bottles. Brody, I'm not kidding when I say this, 2 bottles of oxycodone. Now, after the first half, I only used half a bottle for the first week. My mom was really monitoring me back then, obviously, but I took, I think, 1 pill every like 4 hours. The bottle lasted me a week. After that, I didn't need it anymore because the pain was gone. Now the healing was up to me and how much I cared for it and how much I didn't put myself in harm's way in physical activity, in my nutrition, which obviously back then I didn't know what the hell, what the relevance of nutrition was. But obviously the healing was up to me. So I was left with a bottle and a half of oxycodone. Now, why did they prescribe me so much? There's a reason behind it. That's what I think the population doesn't understand. Now, I'm not speaking out against doctors. I'm just speaking out against the approaches that they're being taught to administer and the associations involved with the pharmaceutical industry. Why was I prescribed so much? Why was I given so much? In the end, what I did was I ended up selling the extras for greens, for marijuana. I mean, I was 16, man. I mean, I would trade like 2 or 3 of them for greens. And you know what I'm talking about when I say greens. But But that's
Oh,
what I
yeah.
was doing. That's what I was doing. So almost like the system set me up. Really, that's what it is. That's what I'm trying to make the point to everybody out there, is that the system, the way they're doing medicine, set me up to all of a sudden have access to marijuana and be in that world, and put me in a circumstance where I was endangering myself. But as a 16-year-old, I didn't see it like that, because what 16-year-old does, most don't. And so that this whole conversation, Brody, actually goes back to your page and that one post that you made on all this Pandora's box that opened up. And I appreciate that post, man, because once again, that's the way Instagram is supposed to be used. And for people out there listening, the audience, the Psych Life audience, I really suggest you check out Brody Miller's channel over here on Instagram. So, Brody, mental health. They create a DSM-5. They create a bunch of diagnoses. Obviously, sometimes I write a diagnosis. I tend to write less than what my supervisor would probably like, but just for the sheer fact, because I understand that when I diagnose someone, it stays in the record. And I understand as well that when I diagnoses such as depression disorder, general anxiety disorder, all they are is an array of symptoms. And they don't really say too much. They just say, okay, this person has been experiencing these symptoms for this amount of time. They meet the criteria for this diagnosis. Let me put it in. And I understand that's not really a long-term chronic illness. So I try only diagnosing the ones that I know that are long-term, that there's something going on that they need extra help in. And I can get in trouble for that. I can get in trouble for that sometimes. But the purpose I was trying to go with is that real mental health is about focusing on the areas in your life and not focusing on the diagnosis. And such as you mentioned earlier, you changed your lifestyle by adding meditation. So did I. That transformed my life. I changed my nutrition. I started focusing more on fruits and vegetables, especially now in my later years. And I feel different. I feel swifter in my thinking. I feel more smoother in my way my processing works. I don't get caught up in as much of the dirt as you will, right, in society, and my sleeping pattern, and these aspects of lifestyle and the people I surround myself with are so important, and I take note of it. And what from your experience, and as a brain trauma survivor, surgery survivor, obviously the lifestyle you incorporated and changed really helped you out in ways that medicine couldn't. Do you mind sharing a little bit about that?
Sure. Yes. I would say it's just a foundation. It's a simple formula that you can follow for brain health. Right now is more difficult to be social due to what's going on, and it's difficult on anybody really. What's the external is really causing internal problems for everybody, and that's okay. If you're struggling, that's okay, because I think everybody's having a little bit of cognitive distortion right now. But if you follow, I guess you would say 8, if you follow your habits, your daily routine, if you get started off your day correctly, then it can really change your perceptions of the world. And that really changed mine. So one would be meditation and nutrition. I already spoke about that. Another one would be focusing on who you surround yourself with. Of course, you want positive people around you. And then, of course, it's what thoughts you put into your mind. What you put into your mind, it's positive thoughts in, positive thoughts out. You want to cultivate great thoughts. It's like your mind is like a garden. I've always said that, because it's what you put in it it's like a seed. You put a seed into your mind, and it eventually blossoms into a flower.
So I'm so sorry to interrupt there, man. I got so excited by what you said. Basically, Brody, it's the thoughts you pay attention to end up growing and manifesting other thoughts that are associated with it.
Exactly. Because, and I've 100%, this isn't just philosophy. It might just sound like philosophy to some people. And because when I first read this in a book, and this is one of my favorite books of all time, it's a monk who sold his Ferrari. One of my favorite books that I've ever read. And I thought it was philosophy too. But when I read it and I started seeing the physical evidence in my life, it was truthfully one of the most beautiful moments, because things started changing and my body started changing and the way that I perceive the world started changing. And once you can change internally, the things on the external truly do change.
I think I posted yesterday, and I'm in the process of writing a book for the audience out there. The self-reflection journal is coming out later this month, so just stay tuned, okay? But Brody, you mentioned about the monk who sold his Ferrari, and I've been wanting to read that book. You beat me to it, and good job on that. But I really mean that, man. Good job on that. That was a nice book, bro. That's a nice read. I was looking at your Instagram page over here, man, and you got so many good things, bro. And I'm so excited, and thank you so much for coming on this platform, bro. For example, you have here, just so the audience knows the difference between hot shower and cold showers. We already talked about that one. Stuff for brain health, THC and the brain. And you even talk about how people have this misconception about marijuana. They only focus on the benefits, but don't understand the type of pattern that can be created, the type of mental dependency that can be created, the type of stagnation in creation and manifestation of what you want from marijuana can stem from abuse, right? And I'm going to go more in here into your page, into something that really, really inspired me right now to talk about is 15 Pineal Gland declassifiers. And I typically don't do this, Brody, but the pineal gland, and most people, go ahead. No, go ahead, man. You're the guest, baby. So go ahead.
So I'm really passionate about the pineal gland. And I truthfully believe that the pineal gland is where our clarity into the quantum universe comes from. So if you can find, this is another thing that the general observer or the general audience may not relate to, but that's okay. But I think that the pineal gland gives us connections to things to the connections to the universe, and to the dream state, and to delta waves, and to powerful creativity that we cannot connect with. And you have to be very diligent into taking care of your pineal gland. And there's many.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry for interrupting, man. That was by accident. I just want to let you know, man. I agree with you 100%. But when people think about the universe, people think about the cosmos, people think about the moon, the sun, and all these aspects, right? They immediately lose interest because they're so focused on the identities they form here, such as their own body, their own thoughts, the identity you form with your own thoughts. That's why today, in today's society, anxiety rates are so high, and people are meeting the symptoms of generalized anxiety disorders and all these other ones so much more often because they're identifying so hard with their mind. And the pineal gland, it's been shown that the more your frontal lobe is operating, the more you're thinking, the more you're identifying with your thoughts, the more you're even thinking. I'm sorry, thinking, period.
Yeah.
Yeah, the more you're thinking, period, your pineal gland will remain shut. And in remaining shut, a person will never really experience that blissfulness state that spiritual leaders such as the Dalai Lama and Sadhguru are always talking about. And I used to open the pineal gland through meditation, and some of the best nights I ever had were me being in a foreign place, obviously because there's new experiences.
Yeah.
Well, after I've meditated the whole day and spent some time alone, and my pineal gland is open, and I could sit. And I remember I didn't have that much money these times, but I would sit on the sidewalk. I would sit anywhere, and I was just somewhere else, man. Like I was there, but I wasn't experiencing the same stress and the same stuff everybody else along the street was walking about. I was free as a bird. And
Brilliant.
and the pineal gland does that. It's actually associated with that type of feeling that you're talking about, that euphoric feeling, that connection with living things, like we mentioned earlier. Because it's one thing to walk around thinking that you're the stuff, you're the shiznit, but it's another thing to actually understand that you wouldn't be alive if it wasn't for that tree next to you. And because what it's breathing, you're breathing in, and what you're breathing out, that tree, you're actually fueling it. And once a person understands that, then they give themselves permission unconsciously to actually feel it inside. And that feeling is when that pineal gland opens just a little bit. And the mastery of meditation is for it to remain open. Man, I never really do this, but I want to tirade there. But is that your experience with the pineal gland? Is that your experience and your knowledge as to what you're concerned? Because I saw your post right here, man. That's what I was scrolling through, concerning the pineal gland, and you even mentioned 15 different things that you can intake to help open it. And just so the audience knows, moringa, I used to drink that in the morning. Ginkgo biloba, I drink that one now instead of moringa. Maybe I should be drinking both. Aloe, I normally just use that when I have sunburns, but I should be drinking that or putting it on my body more often. Turmeric, I was drinking that in the morning with moringa, but then I substituted it with ginkgo. Um, and you have a lot of stuff I've never even heard. I'm imagining reishi, actually. It looks like mushrooms, but I'm not sure.
So that list, that I haven't reached that level of mastery, that of meditational mastery that you've achieved. It seems I've at this point have been experimenting with different herbs and experimenting with different herbs such as those on that list. And I know that it is a connection to that nature, and my pineal gland during these times has actually not been as open as I'd like it to be. So I've been using these different herbs, trying different things to keep it open. But overall, there's been a few times when it has opened and I've experimented, and it's just been that absolute bliss that you're talking about. Connection to all things, all nature. And just like that feeling of consciousness, like of all is one. And and my dreams too, after it was open, were just every night I had lucid dreams, and it was something that I couldn't even compare.
Oh man, dude, dude, I'm beyond words. But let's get one thing clear: I haven't mastered anything. Okay, I had experiences where I'm aware. You know, I don't need a brain scan or anything to tell me. But okay, through weeks of training, of weeks of traveling, because I went backpacking across Europe, through weeks of traveling, through weeks of training my meditation and disassociating myself with objects through meditation. The example I gave you with a chair, I'm meditating. I don't want to think of the word chair. I don't want to even see the chair as a chair, something I sit down as, but just see it as an object, right? This was weeks. I was able toward the latter part of my trip, when I was traveling, to just completely disassociate from my mind and my thoughts, and the type of thoughts I were having were more coming from deep, deep, deep roots within. Now, once I came back to the States, and I gotta go back to school. This was around 4 or 5 years ago. I had to go back to school. I had to get back into city life. Then automatically, it was a lot harder for me to have that pineal gland open. And so what happens? Once in a while, the possibility of using, let's call them cheat codes, occur. And
Right.
cheat codes to the gateway to opening up that pineal gland. Now, that doesn't mean there's been times where I haven't naturally opened it. It's not for as long of a duration as I want to. It was using a cheat code, which we all know from playing video games growing up. If you haven't, then I don't know what to tell you. But you put in a cheat code, it comes out, you get special abilities, but you don't need the cheat code to get the progress that you want. You just the cheat code just cuts it for you. And so, man, I really appreciate this conversation, Brody. But I have a mentor. He just doesn't know I exist. But that's the 2020 year. But his name's Sadhguru. I don't know if have you ever heard of him?
I have Sadhguru. He's a smart guy and a very interesting guy, but he seems so young for his age, though.
Yeah, man. That's the craziest part about him. But he has
That's
he has the Isha Foundation, and I've even thought about just quitting my stuff and just joining him. But then I remember, bro, I'm almost 30 years old. Like, I'm not 20 anymore, 19. You know what I mean? Like, what am I gonna do over there? But anyhow, the point I was trying to get was, over the last year or two, he's really helped me expand my mind in ways that they became closed before. And by closed, I was identifying too hard with what was around me, giving it too much meaning, when
yeah.
really what I need to do is give it less meaning. And that sounds crazy in today's age. And this is not the type of topic I can have with one of my clients
No.
in the mental health field, because it wouldn't be considered proper treatment. But it just goes to show how there's different ways of approaching situations depending on what culture you're in. You can learn new information, and the pineal gland is something that still isn't quite understood.
No.
And I have my questions surrounding as to why they always so selective, whatever it is, they're always so selective on the information that's put out. But the information that interests the public, that information is limited. And I appreciate just even the talk about the pineal gland, the awareness. Most people will look at that post, and I'm raising my phone because obviously it's Instagram and all that. But most people will look at that post and they won't even know what you're talking about. And I just advise people to do their research, man.
Look into it. Absolutely look into that, because what you don't know sometimes can hurt you.
Yes, absolutely, bro. Absolutely, Brody. So, Brody, we've talked a lot about subjects. You educated the public, and from what I find, um, providing an inspiration as to your story regarding uh, the brain surgery and the addiction you were facing before, the left frontal lobe, prefrontal lobe. You also We're able to talk about the lifestyle changes that you did, that really helped you prosper during this last year. And that's why, honestly, it's an honor to sit in front of you, man. I really mean that, man. It really is. We were able to talk about how there's different approaches to health, and the westernized approach isn't the only approach. There's a lot of dilemmas involved, and they're treating the healthcare system almost like a corporate type of style of business for the government, and the people are the ones that are hurting from that. And we talked about the pineal gland and things that can help open up. I'm going to continue taking the ginkgo biloba, but I might have to add turmeric and moringa back on my diet.
Absolutely.
And I appreciate you so much, man, on this platform. Do you want to share to the audience how they can find you and the information you're putting out, the really good information you're putting out there?
Sure. You all can find me at my page at Neural Prosperity, and would love to have you guys on there.
At Neural Prosperity. So NEURAL?
NEURAL Prosperity.
Gotcha, man. I gotcha, man. I really appreciate you having on this platform. I'm sure the audience did as well, Brody. And I hope to have you back on this platform, man. To me, you're a hidden gem. And the platform's always open to you if you ever want to come by and be back a guest on this platform, okay?
All right. Thank you so much, Juan. Pleasure to meet you.
No problem, man. No problem, man. See you guys, and take care, all Psych Lifers out there, all right? Take care.